You're fudging up your resume. All right, tough love from your MilSpouse bestie. Me and my team are going to go through the top resume mistakes we are seeing on a weekly basis from candidates. Tune in now to make sure you're not making these mistakes.
Virtual employment is here to stay. I'm military spouse, VirtForce founder, and your remote work expert, Kimber Hill. Subscribe now to learn how you too can thrive in the virtual workforce.
It's Kimber, the VirtForce founder, and your MilSpouse bestie team to disclose all the resume mistakes you're making. So we are bringing you high-level actionable steps that you can take in your resume to ensure that you are standing head and shoulders above the crowd, because you would think that we don't see these small errors as often as we're dealing with such professional candidates. But the reality is we see resume errors every day, and some undertone communication that we're getting there is you are lacking attention to detail, or you're not taking an extra step to double check yourself before you send in your resume. That's what it communicates when there is an issue. So our team, Felicia Valier, our talent director, and Katie Castillo, our digital engagement coordinator, we are receiving and reviewing resumes all the time. So the three of us are going to talk about common mistakes that you can avoid. So let's start with you, Katie. You want to kick us off with issues that you see on resumes most frequently?
Yes. So I received a resume this week it was an awesome resume from an awesome candidate, and it didn't have her name on it. So it seems really simple, but making sure that you have your name, your phone number, and your email address on the resume, and make sure that they are up to date and correct.
This can happen when you're drafting and you're redrafting and you're triple drafting. And then at somewhere along the way, something accidentally happens to remove it, or you thought maybe I'll put that in later, and it simply just falls off the radar. Or we open up a draft where it was deleted and we're not checking it before we send it. So make sure that you are checking the resume. Felicia, I know that you had some issues with resumes, particularly this month. What are the issues that you're seeing?
Definitely. So my biggest thing is understanding the right situation for the right format of resume that you're using. Oftentimes, what we see is somebody who is applying for a civilian role, but they will apply with their federal resume, or they will be applying for a VirtForce job. And instead of targeting or tailoring the resume, they're just going to upload their Indeed resume. And what this says is a few different things. The federal resume is a completely different beast than a civilian resume. And a civilian resume is succinct, it's short, it's meant to be concise for a reason, whereas a federal resume is meant to show you a lot more content. And that's just not the right situation with the roles that we are typically reviewing on a daily basis. And it's the same thing with an Indeed resume. An Indeed resume is not going to give us enough information. The formatting is off. You can tell right away. Typically, going back to what Katie was saying, the email address on your Indeed resume is typically an Indeed related email address. It's not going to go directly to you. It's going to route through Indeed. So being specific and being very thoughtful in the type of resume format that you're using when you're applying to the roles.
That's so interesting that you would see lots and lots of context on a position that doesn't require it. Yeah. What are some tips for our candidates for them to understand and know in what context a long federal resume is required versus a short civilian resume?
Sure. So a federal resume, if you're going through USA Jobs, if it says like it's a government contract role, if it's anything that is stating that it is related to a government role, that is something that you're going to want to focus more in on a federal resume format, that long format. And even now, the government is oftentimes cutting off that long format at around 5 or 6 pages. It's not even going as 10, 12, 14 pages as long as they used to go.
Yeah, and they're completely different. That civilian shorter resume, you should be stacking your certifications and hard skills at the very top of that, followed immediately by clear, concise work experience so that we can review it within 1 to 2 pages maximum. All right, I'm going to talk about issues that I've seen on resumes this week. First of all, sending resumes that have been edited by other people. And when I get the resume, I open it and the review feature in Microsoft Word is still on. And I can still read the comments from the previous reviewer making suggestions to you about how you should improve that section or that statement. So a few things on this subject. First of all, you should be clearing all comments and reviews by going through and individually resolving the comment to effectively delete it from the document so that there's no history of that comment there. Then you should be exporting that as a PDF because nothing can be edited or changed. No comments can be added after it is in PDF form. Then after you export it to a PDF, you should open the PDF and review it because it is possible to export to a PDF and a comment was not removed and is there in plain sight in the margin of your PDF where you can see it. So you'll have to go through that process a few times to make sure that you clear it. My biggest piece of advice is to look at it again in its final form. A trick that I often use, or I used to use, is I would email my resume to myself as if I were emailing it to the employer. And I would open the email and open the document as if I were the employer before I actually did the hard step of sending it to the employer. So what do we learn from this comment and review process though? What I've learned is that you should be writing your resume yourself. I don't mind and I don't have any issues with candidates who write their own resume and then send it out for approval, but you should at least do your first few drafts yourself. Please, 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 I've said this before and I will say it again. I do not recommend resume writing services. I do not recommend going to even the best that you pay hundreds of dollars for. I don't recommend going to the free services because only you know yourself and can sell yourself. If you need help formatting, that's fine. If you need help making it look nice, that's fine. But you need to be putting the content on that page before you go to have it written. Why? I have personally been through this as an employer where I have hired someone because on paper, they looked perfect and their interview went well. It was a great personality match. But when they got into the job, they had absolutely no idea what they were doing. And within 8 weeks, after going through performance reviews and PIPs and everything, we had to terminate. And that was not fun. Ultimately, I found out that that individual had their resume written by a service. The resume was written to the job that they wanted. And boy, did they land the job, yes. But were they qualified and were they capable? No, and it was very unfair to that person to have to go through the process of realizing how unprepared they were for the amount of responsibility that they were walking into. So please, please write your own resume. Any additional tips, team?
I think you hit a nail on the head when you said that you are the only person that knows your story. It's one thing when you are using a service to help you format, to get the words right, to get the content, pretty and everything like that, especially when you're transitioning out of the service. It's a little bit hard to get all of that onto paper. But if you're not the one sitting down and doing the work and you're not the one who is actually putting in that effort and saying, this is what I've done, this is how I did it, it's not going to come across on paper, in the resume, and then in the interview. If you don't know how to speak to what's on your resume in your interview, your first interview, your second interview, and then in the job, you are going to fall flat on your face. And that's embarrassing and heartbreaking, to be frank.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It also gives you an opportunity to really understand how to speak about yourself to the position. And that really brings us onto the topic of tailoring, because you only writing your own resume and tailoring it yourself for the position that you want to interview for, it's like dress rehearsal for the interview that you are inevitably going to have, right? And we also know that we can't just lay and spray that resume. I see people often, saying if you haven't applied to at least 50 jobs or you haven't applied to at least 100 jobs, then you are not sending your resume out enough. We take a completely inverted approach to that. You should not be applying to that many jobs. You should be hand-picking, depending on your bandwidth, hand-picking up to 5 positions at a time. And even that is a lot because you're tailoring 5 different resumes, but hand-picking those, intentionally molding your resume to those positions, and then diligently applying and giving your all to that position. Lay and spray with a resume that was written by a service that you're not paying attention to, you're wasting your time, you're wasting the employer's time, bottom line.
It makes me cringe, Kimber. Lay and spray makes me cringe.
Well, and it's important to note too, if you are using a resume service to write your resume, you are fully reliant on them for every job you apply for until you learn to do it yourself. That if you want to apply to a new job and tailor your resume to a new job, you're going to be reliant on them until you figure it out yourself.
And it's not hard. I think I think candidates can be very intimidated by it. And like I said, and Felicia reiterated this, if you get your content on paper, that is all you have to be responsible for, is sitting down and line by line bullet pointing every responsibility you had at every job. Okay, then you move forward from there. You move forward on your own, or you move forward with someone who can assist you, but they can't assist you unless you take the time to get to know yourself and get to know what kind of position you want to apply for. So let's talk about tailoring a little bit deeper. Katie, I know this is something that's been really important to you in the last 2 business weeks. You've been bringing it up a few different times. Can you talk to us about why it's important?
Yes, of course. I've seen so many resumes recently that are not tailored, and you're doing yourself 0 favors if you're not tailoring your resume. I could talk about it for hours, but basically in a nutshell, tailoring your resume is taking your experience that you have and looking at the job requisition for the position that you are applying for and using the words and rewording your experience to match what job you're applying for. It basically highlights you as a candidate as having the experience that they're looking for that position. I really can't say enough how important this step is to showing yourself as the best candidate for a position.
Yeah.
And so Kimber, do you want to talk about how to do that?
I'm happy to. And you kind of sparked this analogy for me. Tailoring. What does the word tailor mean? I don't know the exact definition, but when we think about tailoring, we think about taking a piece of clothing and tucking it in the right places with sewing thread and needles to where it conforms to our body and shows us and presents us in the best light. Would you go to a Navy ball or an Army ball in a dress you bought off the rack without taking the straps up or hemming the bottom? No. I mean, if you're blessed and you can fit the off the rack model, I get it, but I'm 5 foot and I have to hem about 6 inches off of everything that I purchase, right? It's the concept with your resume. Would you just print out a standard about me and hand it into an employer and say, okay, it's your job as an employer to figure out how I'm going to fit in with you? No. You have to sell yourself to them. You have to tailor the words, you have to tailor the paragraphs to fit what they are looking to hire. You have to show them that you are the right fit. So this is the position. This is the bullet point that I pulled out. My existing bullet point was about Adobe Creative Cloud. This was a marketing resume where I used to work in the marketing industry. And this was one of my first bullets. Produce creative material using Adobe Creative Suite, including promotional videos, print photography, and copywriting for print and radio advertisements. All right. So this is the job description of a random marketing manager position that I just found on LinkedIn today. Control F for the word Adobe, because I want to mold my Adobe bullet to be what they are looking for. While my general bullet is very general, that I know all software in the Adobe Creative Suite, they are specifically looking for this software. Interest in developing Adobe After Effects capability. And then here, interested in developing Adobe After Effects capabilities and exploring AI capabilities for design and marketing efficiency. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go back to my bullet and I'm going to rework it. Adobe After Effects is for digital advertisements. And AI is also going to be for digital interface advertisements. So while I was previously leading with my print and radio capabilities, I'm going to adjust this a little bit. Let me zoom in for you so you can see. First thing I'm going to do is transition this to digital advertisements. Adobe Creative Suite, including Adobe After Effects for promotional videos and digital advertisements. The deeper you can go with this, the better. So for example, this is version 1 of the adjustment. Version 2 might go just a little deeper. Produce creative material using Adobe Creative Suite, including After Effects for promotional videos and digital advertisements. Let's go back to the job requisition and see if we can find what type of advertisements they want. Video menus, marquee signage, and special event videos, including After Effects for special event videos and marquee signage and digital advertisements. All right, so that is version 3. Produce creative material using Adobe Creative Suite, including After Effects for special event videos, marquee signage, and digital advertisements. Now, if you're the hiring manager for this position and you get a resume that leads with this bullet versus the tailored twice bullet, which one are you going to interview? You tell me. All right, that's how it's done, and I'll stop sharing. Do you ladies have anything to add?
I think one of the best things to do is to take your time when you're going through and looking at the job description compared to your resume. So
yeah,
making sure that, where you're listing your skills, where you're listing that in your bullet points and everything, you're not being overly repetitive. Listing it in the skills. You've talked about Adobe After Effects, you've talked about Adobe Creative Suite in your bullet points. Now you don't have to necessarily list those separately under the skills section, because I've seen them as a reviewer resumes. I've seen them now twice in your bullet points. I don't need to see them again in the skills section. I know. Cool, gotcha. I know that they're there. Don't have to add them down there. Use that section down there in the skills for different content that you haven't hit necessarily that can add value to you as a candidate.
Absolutely. And that's why your lay and spray option isn't working. Why do people typically lay and spray? Because they don't believe that they have the time to pay attention and they want to rush through this process. And when you rush through that process, you're going to attract positions that are going to consistently give you low quality employment experiences. When you take the time to apply yourself in a high quality capacity to the application process, you're going to attract high quality employment opportunities.
Exactly. And if you are laying and spraying on the VertForce job board, we do know this. We know this. We see you. We look at every resume, every applicant that comes in through our application process. So we do notice. Please don't do that.
I will say, if you're applying to a position through this team, you better tailor if you want an interview.
We notice.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Thank you for giving me your wisdom to impart to the VertForce community today. I appreciate you. Have a great day.